Haiti borders with the Dominican.
Her name is Serena Buffalino. They call her Mrs. B, and her class always begins with a pledge.
Something local, something global. Haiti.
They're words that carry weight here. Helping yourself means helping others, giving back, here and a world away in Haiti.
And nobody's helping them, except for people like us.
It was through her the class learned of Haiti, of the nearly 1 million orphans, many with no school, no support, no Mrs. B in their lives.
They could not wrap their head around that.
Mrs. B's students are among Toronto's most at risk. Their challenges vary from emotional and behavioral difficulties to learning disabilities. Their trauma is so severe they can't function in a regular school setting, and we aren't allowed to show most of their classmates.
For most of the kids, most of society has turned them away. And in this classroom, they're accepted. They're accepted no matter what for who they are.
Take Yolanda. She came here last year so burdened and withdrawn, she would often fall silent, sometimes for days on end. It was, she says, Mrs. B's patience, her quiet encouragement, that saved her.
She actually saves people's lives from dangers.
And perhaps that's why these marginalized kids feel such a kinship with the orphans of Haiti, and why they were moved to act.
And so when Yolanda and Jackie and Patrick said, well, Miss B, we need to build them a school.
Build a school, no easy task. They started out raising money. They sold samosas, washed cars, screened movies, you name it. And in just a few months, this little class raised $20,000. So much, it's not just a one-room schoolhouse they can build, but a full 3-story school. And so Mrs. B set off on a journey she'd dreamed of, up into the dusty mountains above Port-au-Prince to a town called Canaan. It's home to thousands of earthquake refugees who live with no running water, no electricity, and no school, until now. The first step was a temporary school. It's up and running. 53 students already in uniform. The permanent school for 250 is growing from its foundations.
It makes me want to cry because she just makes me feel so awed, and I'm very proud of her.
All of this because of a handful of students back in Canada. And Mrs. B, the teacher who believed in them.
These are for you.
At another fundraiser, a special tribute to the students, accepted by someone who without Mrs. B might not be here.
They believe in me and I believe in them, and together we not only change our lives, but we change the world around us.
For inspiring great things and seeing the potential in everyone, Serena Buffalino is this week's Everyday Hero.
This is the reason why I do what I do, is because of Yolanda and all the...
Again. Good morning. Bonjour. Como ça va? Ni hao. Hola. Bienvenue. Wan Ying. Bienvenidos. And welcome to another exciting episode of Gem Hunter Stories. My name is Barry B. Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller. And each and every week, I have the distinct honor and privilege of taking you on a journey to places you've never been before, to stories you've never heard before. Each week, I get to take you on a mental, physical, and spiritual adventure into the art, science, history, and magic of gemstones, precious metals, and fine jewelry. Because it's really all about the stories. See, the amazing thing about gemology, the thing that makes the link, the jump for me between gemstones and people, is the fact that it's all about a story. Everything that you've ever heard, everything that you've ever thought of gemstones came to you by virtue of a story. Someone told you about a gemstone and you understood what it meant. You, even if you didn't understand, even if you didn't own anything, if you knew that someone told you that this was gold, if you found gold in the street, you would understand what it means. You would look at it and say, that's gold. The same way that James Marshall told Johann Sutter before the California gold rush. He said, sir, I think this is gold. And Mr. Sutter immediately knew exactly the value of that. The thing that I want you to get out of each and every show is that nothing has value without a story. And those same characteristics, those same concepts that I use to appraise gemstones and precious metals, I use as a template, as a inception point, as a bridge to help people discover the value of their own stories. This week, we are going to be we're going to continue our conversation for the month of July. So we're talking about rubies. Rubies is the king of all gemstones. No matter what you may like in other gemstones, in the world and the universe of gemology, a ruby is the king. Now, let's go back into the science a little bit. A ruby, as I told you before, is basically an aluminum oxide with just a hint of chromium. Aluminum oxide with a hint of chromium. That's what makes a ruby red, that hint of chromium. A ruby is the sister element. It's the sister of a sapphire. Rubies have chromium in it, and sapphires come in every color of the rainbow, all the way into pink. And then once it moves into a deeper red, then you have a ruby. And to begin to understand what a ruby is, I have to go back to something that I said a couple of episodes again, and I don't think I really gave it the power that it deserves. So let me say that again. I realized that there's Leonardo DiCaprio, who I love him as an actor. There's two movies that he played in that speaks to the power of gemstones. One was Inception. And the concept, the theme of that movie, the plot of that movie is that if you plant something in someone's mind deep enough, that idea, that thought, that original thought will grow in their mind to the point where that thought, that story becomes theirs. And once you have that in your mind, you can never get away from that. You believe in it. It's what you fight for, it's what you believe in, it's what you work towards. Your whole world believes in that thought. Those of you who are entrepreneurs, and those of you who are parents, those of you who have businesses, those of you who go to work every day, police officers, fire, you believe in the story. Someone planted that story. You know what you should be one day, Barry? What, Dad? You should be a fireman. And if he was a fireman, then I took on that. I believed, I saw him every day, and I believed in the story, Inception, the beginning. And the other movie was The Great Gatsby. Leonardo DiCaprio played the lead character, Gatsby, and there's that scene, such an extremely romantic scene where he, the Gatsby, is about ready to kiss the woman that he loves, Daisy. And before he kisses her, he looks up to God, because he knew at that point what his story was. He knew that he could rise to any level that he wanted to. He had this unbelievable mansion and money and everything that the world could possibly give a person. And he knew that if he kissed, he would be giving all that up if he kissed this girl. And in that scene, the person who was writing his biography actually, said that he looked up and said he knew if he kissed her, that his mind would no longer be able to romp like the mind of God. Think about that for a second. And with that knowledge, he willingly kissed her. He just let go. Voila. That's what a ruby is. That's what a ruby is. When you understand what a ruby is, even though this is the molecular structure of a ruby, it is basically aluminum oxide. But when you know what a ruby is, when you understand what people feel about rubies, I read a quote once that someone said, ancient people said that a ruby was the most precious gift that God has ever given man. Think about that. Here is a gemstone that is made up of 3 elements: aluminum, oxygen, with a hint of chromium. And yet someone can look at this stone and say that this was the most precious gift that God could ever give man. And it's so easy for me when I hear that, it's so easy for me to make the jump to someone that you love. For me, it's simple to see how someone could say that about a woman, because that's what Gatsby said about Daisy, that his mind, even though he knew that he would no longer be moving in the direction that he was moving in at that time, just the simple kiss was worth it. Extrapolate that over the tens of thousands of years and think about how for gemstones, men, for gold, for gemstones, men, for rubies, a man would risk anything for. I can never get over the concept of, again, getting on a boat, going across an ocean. And those of you who have taken 1 or 2 week cruises, imagine being on a ship for 3-4 months, aimless. There's no, tell you how I date myself. There's no Isaac. There's no cruise director, Julie, on the Love Boat. There's none of that. You're just with 40, 50, 80 guys, funky, no, everything, crossing an ocean, landing in a land that you've never been in, dealing with indigenous tribes, sometimes hostile indigenous people, all the dangerous fauna and flora of the area, mountains, just for the possibility of holding, of experiencing something like this, called a ruby. Rubies has been around for thousands of years. Since 600 BC, man knew of a ruby, and a ruby represents passion. Rubies represent the direct connection to the blood of man. Ancient Hindus would wear rubies to battle because they knew it would protect them. A ruby gave you courage. If you wore one, you were embodied with a courage, a strength, a calmness of your spirit. And on the other side of that ruby, also that red color. Remember I talked about the wavelength, 694 nanometers. So you and I looking at this gemstone, all of us, think about the power of it. All of us are looking at this gemstone right now. And the reason why you see it as red is because there is a wavelength traveling through, even though some of us are listening to this show in France and in China and Bangladesh, but that same wavelength has traveled through thousands of miles and we still see it as red. And that red color activates something in our minds, and from that we feel something. How is that any different for something that has 3 elements to something like us who has 6 elements? Oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, iron, phosphorus, and hydrogen. I think I said hydrogen twice, but we're only made up of 6 elements. So how is it difficult to see that the same way that we feel so passionate about a gemstone, we could feel that passion for somebody that we love, for someone that we hold in our arms, for someone that you see across the room, arriving on a train, and there is that person, there's that man, there's that woman that you thought about, you was just merely a dream, and yet there she is. When you have a child that you love, though some of you see my niece and nephew who I absolutely love, 6 and 8 years old, Bryson and Gianna. And when I see them run, when I see them hug, when I see the way, feel the way they hold my hand, I experience that passion, that love. When you understand, if this gemstone represents passion, if this gemstone is the king of gemstones, if this gemstone is, if you begin to understand that this is the king of gemstones, then you begin to understand why I feel that it's strange that we don't treat the people that we love with that same passion, with that same energy. If a man, and I always say, fill in the blanks. For me, it's a woman. But if a man says to a woman, I love you, you mean the world to me. You are like my ruby. You are my gemstone. You represent everything. When I look at this gemstone, when I gave you this gemstone, I meant this gemstone, for this gemstone to represent the love and the passion I have for you as my woman, as the woman that intoxicates my soul. So if your man said that to you, if your man described it, a person that you love described you in those terms, then there comes a responsibility with that. As a gemologist, as someone who appraises gemstones, I don't get a chance. I don't say, oh, this is aluminum oxide 1 second, and then the next second it's something else. No, it is what it is, as I speak about it all the time. Gem identification. What you have described that this is the woman that you love is a ruby. She is a ruby. She is gold. She is diamonds put together. And you tell her that this is forever. I will feel like this for you forever. And you give her that symbol of your love. Then you forever understand the relationship that you have with that person. And that's how you treat her. That's how you love her. The wavelengths of the colors that she or he gives off to you should intoxicate you. should make you just sit there and go, remember that commercial long time ago, Obsession? She was like a fever from which I should never recover. That's what happened. The people that dug this gemstone up, the person who cut this gemstone, the person who designed this gemstone, then put it together with gold and diamonds in this case to enhance just the beauty and the elegance of the ruby. That person understood how rare it is. A ruby is extremely rare. Not just the color, but just the coming together. So a ruby, again, a hint of chromium, sapphire, which is the sister element of ruby, iron and titanium, still rare, but a ruby is the most rarest of all gemstones. Not just in the color, but in the size, in where it can be found, and how it can be all put together. And the man who understands that about a ruby should be the same man that understands that ruby that he is presenting to the woman that he loves. There should be no difference. How do I know this? How do I know this? Does this sound so romantic? You're like, oh, Barry, whatever. No. Allow me to introduce you to the sunrise ruby. The sunrise ruby. The sunrise ruby. In fact, do I want to do, let's see, the sunrise ruby. No, I'm sorry. This is not the sunrise ruby. I just thought about the looking at it. This is the Carmen Lucia ruby. The Carmen Lucia ruby. This is one of the largest rubies in the world. This ruby is 25.89 carats. Now, understand in terms of rarity, you very rarely, extremely rare to find a ruby 20 carats. Extremely rare. So this is 25 carats, 25.59 carats. This is a Burmese ruby. Burma is now called Myanmar. But this is a Burmese ruby. Look at the color. Look at the color. This is a cushion cut diamond with 25.59 carat with two triangular shaped diamonds on the side. Total carat weight is something like 2.85 carats, set in a platinum setting. Given, here's where the passion and love, given to Carmen Lucia by her husband, Dr. Peter Buck. You know who Dr. Peter Buck was or is? Dr. Peter Buck is the guy. He was a doctor. He was a nuclear scientist. But you know why he's known and was able to forge a ruby that like this that cost 30. Actually, I don't really know the price of this stone but I will compare it with another stone I'll show you in a second. But this gemstone is at least $30 million. You can find it at the Smithsonian Institution in the Hall of Gems. Dr. Peter Buck gave it to Carmen because she was undergoing cancer treatment. He loved her so much, and he was older when he met her. In fact, he was 86 years old when he bought her this diamond. But his fame and fortune, the reason why Dr. Buck is one of the greatest men as far as just investments in the history of gemstones, or as far as business, is the fact that Dr. Peter Buck was the man who started Subway. Yeah, he is the guy who started Subway. He took $1,000, gave it to his son's friend to start a sandwich shop, and he called it Subway. And if you look at Subway, and I've always wondered this, it's called Doctors Associates, Doctors Associates. And I used to say, why is it called Doctors Associates? Because he is a doctor, and he is now worth $2.6 billion. Today, he's still alive. Carmen, unfortunately, passed on. But he bought her this ring to symbolize the love that he felt for her. She was from Brazil. And, I couldn't find a picture of her, but just think about Brazil. He gave her this ring because she was lying there in her hospital bed, being overtaken by cancer. Dr. Buck said, I want to buy you something that symbolizes the love that I have for you. This symbolizes the fact that I appreciate how much you have been a mom to my children, how you have loved me. And he was much older than her, probably 40, 50 years older than her. And yet he loved her and she loved him. And this ruby, the passion, the beauty of this ruby symbolized his love for her. And she was overjoyed. In fact, she looked forward to wearing it once she got out of her cancer treatment. And so he got together with the Smithsonian Institution. He gave them all the money that they needed to purchase this gemstone. And unfortunately, she never got a chance to wear it. She died soon after he bought it. But imagine the fact that he loved her so much that he bought it and then he donated it to the Smithsonian Institution because his wife was Brazilian and she became an American citizen, and she loved America so much. She loved the people of America, the culture, everything so much about America. He wanted to give America a gift. A gift of not only this stone, but he wanted to thank America for including his wife in the history, in the story of America. Yeah. So every time you go to Subways, every time you drive past Subways, because of this story, you will always think that in Washington, D.C., there is a gemstone that exists merely as a representation of this man's love, this man's passion, this man's devotion to the woman that he met. Even though she came from a foreign land, she was the dream from which the fever from which he shall never recover. And I want you to think about that while we take this message from our sponsors. All right, we are back talking about rubies and passion, rubies and love. The thing that gets me about gemstones, the reason why I study gemstones is because I'm trying to get an understanding of why we live in this world, not just in this country, but in this world where people have issues with color. Why is it that something we can so highly prize, something that comes from a country where we can so prize and value the color red, but at the same time we have problems with people who have a reddish hue to their skin. The thing about gemstones that amazes me, that even though we live in a world where everybody has a different opinion about everything. If I said black, you said white. If I say up, you say down. If I say in, you say out. But yet, with gemstones, there is an understanding. We understand the value of that because we were all told the same story, that this is something of value. This is something to be praised. This is something to be desired. And my question is, why can't we, if we can feel that way about a ruby, why can't we feel that way about each other? Why can't we feel that way about ourselves? This, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the Queen's favorite gemstone, her favorite tiara. You know, Queen of England has a lot of tiara. This is her favorite tiara. If you look at Queen Elizabeth's pictures throughout the years, Queen Elizabeth II, the one that's alive now, she has worn this tiara for her whole life. And in the center is a beautiful, spectacular, magnificent ruby. Because for her, it symbolizes the passion that she has towards the British, the country of England and the British people. That is her passion. Even the crown, the official crown jewels. In fact, interesting story. This is the official imperial crown of the Queen of England. What you'll notice on it is the huge diamond. This is the part of the Culligan diamond. This is the Culligan one, which was part of a huge, magnificent diamond of a 3,600 carat diamond. So when they cut it, there's about, and we'll go into that, there's about six different or seven Culligans. This is the Culligan one, something like 314 carats. And above this is a red stone. And the reason why I call it a red stone, because for hundreds of years, this crown, this stone was discovered in 1346. And it wasn't until the 18th century that they discovered that this stone is actually not a ruby. It's called the Black Knight's ruby, but this stone is actually not a ruby. This stone is actually a spinel. This is the spinel, and next week we will go over red stone. So this is the Black Knight's ruby that sits in the crown jewels of the imperial crown of the Queen of England, and yet for hundreds of years it was believed to be a ruby, and it's actually not. It's a red spinel. Again, people from all over the world understand what a ruby is. Why? It's because we were all been told the same story. Think about the story that you create when those of you, this is July, and many of us are getting married or renewing our vows. I told you years ago, 15 years ago, I got married on July 2nd. So all of us in our own ways, picked July as a symbol of our love. It was a date that we wanted to remember all the time. So that's what we did because we believed in the story. Allow me to introduce you. Now, I already told you about the diamond that was given to, Carmen Lucia diamond. Now let me introduce you to the most expensive gemstone in the entire world. This is the sunrise diamond. The sunrise diamond, the sunrise ruby. Just take a moment to look at it. This is perfection. When you, as a gemologist, as an appraiser, when you look at a ruby and you see this color, this is perfection. And what makes this really magnificent and truly rare is this is the natural color. There's no treatment to this. Any ruby that you own at home, the rubies in my ring, the rubies in my pendant, all those rubies have been treated. 92% of all rubies in the world have been treated, has been usually heat treated in order to create that color, that red that we all love. But this, in some of us Carmen's ring, are natural rubies. Natural. This ruby, the sunrise ruby, is also a 25 carat diamond, almost 26 carats, with two diamonds on the side called heptagonal, meaning it has 7 sides. 7 sides equal the weight, almost 3 carats total weight, just the diamonds. This ruby sold in 2015 for $30 million. It was the most highest amount paid for a colored gemstone other than colored diamonds. Rubies are magnificent in and of itself and rare. So to have a natural colored ruby of this quality, of this transparency, of this, just look at the color, how it blends all the way through. Understand that this gemstone is how it reacts with the light. And when this ring came up for auction, it sold for $30 million. Private collection. You will never see a gemstone of this quality. There's different grades. This is what's called pigeon blood red. When someone describes a ruby as pigeon blood red, this is what they're talking about. Voila. It was sold, actually, the auction. I saw some excerpts of the auction. It was 2 people, anonymous, who were going for this ring. This ring originally was supposed to be valued at $17 million as the reserve, and it far exceeded that within minutes. That's what passion is. That's what love is. That's what gemstones inspire in people. So my question is not only to women, but to men. My question is, if you love your woman to that level, if you say to her that you love her, that she is your gemstone, then you have to treat her like that. You have to understand what she is. And to the ladies, whether you have someone in your life or not, this is the time, the moment to begin to understand what type of gemstone you are. How do you feel about yourself? Discover the value of your own stories. Is it beginning to make sense? Because I told you a story of what this is, the sunrise ruby. In fact, it was called the sunrise ruby taken from the Sufi poet, the 13th century Sufi poet Rumi, Rumi. He was a romantic poet. So they took that book that he wrote and they named this ruby the Sunrise Ruby. So when you begin to understand, as that woman sitting here watching this show, you are beautiful. You are rarer than this because there is only one you. Repeat after me. There is only, fill in the blank, put your name in it, you. You are that magnificent ruby. I want you to think about it. Remember all the things that your man said to you when he first met you, when he said to you that I knew if I married you, kissed you, I would no longer be able to romp like the mind of God, meaning that it makes you stop. It makes you think. That's what you have done for some fortunate person that you have come into their lives and that you have shared who you are with them. And that man gave you this ring as a symbol of that love. He could have given you anything, but he gave you this. Peter Buck, with all the money, he is worth $2.6 billion today. And he loved Carmen so much, he wanted to symbolize that by giving that love. And he loved her so much that he wanted to share his love with the whole entire world. And taking that ring from his beloved after she passed and donating it to one of the greatest museums in the world because he wanted the world to know that there was once upon a time, there was a woman named Carmen Lucia. And I had the opportunity of all the greatest riches that I have in my life, $2.6 billion, but I have only met one true gem that was worth all the money in the world to me. That is why he gave her a ruby. When you understand how what the energy that a ruby gives, when you understand that why the cultures throughout history, and the amazing thing about it is it's not just cultures in one part of the world. It's not just British culture or African culture or Asian culture or South American cultures. Rubies can be found in almost every continent on the face of the planet, and yet they all feel the same way. This is look at this necklace. Look at this necklace produced by Cartier with a platinum setting. Look at this necklace. Imagine wearing this necklace and you with that necklace hanging on your décolleté. I love that word. You're not just your chest, your décolleté, hanging there to the point where when someone sees you with this necklace on, to me, in my mind, they can't tell the difference between the beauty of the necklace and the beauty of the person that the necklace is hanging on. This is a symbol of love. This is a symbol of magnificence. That's what a gemstone is. That's what the whole history of gemstones and precious metals and fine jewelry is. It is a representation of who we are. It is God's representation of what happens when you bring elements together, and for one brief shining moment, it has produced you. It has produced you. As rare as a ruby is, it will never be as rare as you, as your love. If you've ever been in love with a person before, you know what it feels like to hold them in your arms, to kiss them, to look at the glow in their eyes. And if you had that kind of money, you would buy this ring. That woman that you call your queen, Barbara says this is the diamond factor experience. And we often talks about queens. So if you are in love with a queen, well, then there's the crown. There's the crown that she could wear, not because you have money, but because this is a representation of how her man, how her woman loves you, loves her. That's what a ruby is. When you wear this ruby on, when you wear rubies on your chest, when you wear this, you understand why the ancients, why the people in Egypt, why the people in China, why the people in South America, when they wore this, it empowered them. India, it empowered them with courage, with passion. They could feel the heat of it laying on their décolleté, on their wrists, on their ears, on their fingers, on their toes. And they, because of the power of it, whether it's real or not, you believe that it has power. So therefore it does. That's why it's so easy to make the jump between gemstones and people or gemstones and women, because it's the same thing. It's just molecular structures being put together in such a way that it made something completely unique called you. When someone looks at you, what they're looking at is a wavelength. That you represent a wavelength. You see me, I am the color that I am because of the way the light interacts with my skin color. And my skin color has removed all the other colors, and what you see manifested is the color that I am. So if that is the case, then if that is the case with a gemstone, people ask me, I had a person ask me once, does a gemstone exist if there's no light? No. A ruby is not a ruby without the light. There is a relationship between the light and that ruby. That ruby cannot exist without the light because no one would see it. There would be nothing to interact with. That's the same thing with the person that you love. What you see is their manifestation of who they are interacting with the light, with their environment, and you fell in love with that. The way their eyes sparkle, the way their skin radiates. If you have children, you see that in them. That's what Dr. Buck saw when he saw this ruby. When he saw this ruby, he knew that his wife longed and loved this ruby. He said, I have got to get her that. Because that symbolizes what their love together, their short time together meant. Should you be so fortunate? This is called the Hope Ruby. This is the Hope Ruby. Yes, the Hope Ruby sounds familiar. Yes, because it was owned by the same gentleman who owned the Hope Diamond. This is not talked about as often, but this is the Hope Ruby that sold for $8.8 million. $8.8 million. So the lesson, what I want you to begin to understand is that the same concepts, the same things that make this such a highly prized gemstone is inside of you. That's what people see. That's what you felt when you love someone, when you saw that person walk across the room, that person hit you just like that gemstone. Just like that ruby. And once you have understood that you are whatever gemstone you are, but if you understand that you are a ruby forever. You are that forever. And what makes it really special, what makes women truly unique, even better than a gemstone, even something as magnificent as this, $30 million. Look at this. But the difference between this ruby and you as a woman is that you can decide to be whatever gemstone that you want to be on that day. You can become an emerald, a sapphire, a diamond, turquoise, topaz, a ruby. And my job as your man, as your lover, as the man who decided to spend his time, his life with you, is to understand those differences. That's what passion is. See, I'm old fashioned. I grew up, it's almost a curse. I grew up watching way too many romantic movies when I was a kid. My mother was a lot of things, but she was also a crier. She loved romantic, the old Humphrey Bogart movies, the Cary Grant. And oftentimes, as I was the oldest child, my mother would sit me in front of a television and we'd be watching these movies. And watching those movies, I began to think that that's what romance is. Remember back in the old days when you kissed the girl? When you kissed the girl, that was so special. And if you kissed her in such a way where her leg would just rise up, the way that your legs would just rise up. I always thought that's how you kiss a woman. You kiss her, you touch her to the point where her leg just rises up. That was that reaction. I grew up probably in the wrong period of time, because once upon a time, if you wanted to be with a woman that represented this, that this ring represented, you'd have to kill a dragon. Yeah. You'd have to kill a dragon, or at least come back with a few countries, name Diane Land, Diane country, Diane city, because of the representation of that love that you feel for that person. And the only thing I'm asking people to do is take a second, take some time to think about what is value. What is value? Nothing has value without a story. So whatever your story is, whatever made you up, whatever molecular processes that took place that created the person that you are, when you take all those pieces and put them together, you ultimately make something beautiful, something magnificent, something that will stay in your, not only in your mind, but in the minds of the person who beholds you forever. And that has been the way it has been for since gemstones and man have evolved, have come on this planet. Gemstones, rubies, Napoleon, when he was coronated, he literally gave money to all his marshals because he wanted the event to his coronation to become an emperor. And for Josephine, even though she was treacherous, to become an empress, he gave money to all his marshals, all his men. And he wanted to take that money and give it to them so they can go and buy something that enhanced the event, that everyone would wear something that showed who they were. So he gave it to one general, and that general bought his wife a ruby, a magnificent ruby. It's called a panure, parure, P-R-R, panure, which means set in French. Panure means French. So basically you would get a whole set, the earrings, the necklace, the ring, the bracelets together. And those came in that. He bought that for her because he wanted to show her and the world how much he loved her. how much she meant to him. So I hope you enjoyed today. And next week we will talk about just red stones in general and how each the color red manifests in different energies, different powers, different enhancements, different things that a red stone does. So, but until next week, I want you to think about today. I want you to think about who you are, how you became who you are in your life, and take that time to discover the value of your own stories. Au revoir.
I'm hanging on your every word, the love inside, I feel it burn. I'm never fair.